Hello then folks, welcome back to another Euros video. Is it coming home? Well, we're going to find out. Of course, Euro 2020, 21, 2020, 20... No, we're still not sure. They're keeping the branding of last year, but we also have we're just sort of accepting it now. We've just gone back in time. We're trying to get that last year back that we've already lost. I feel that's what's happening now. And as you probably have seen, or maybe you haven't seen, and if you're new to the channel, welcome. This is going to put you off. I have predicted England to get to the final of Euro 2020, and this German game looks like their biggest obstacle to get to that final. So in this video we'll be talking about the 11 that I want to pick and Gareth should definitely be listening to, as well as how we stop Germany, why Germany have been actually quite good and sort of under the radar quite good, it feels like, and how England will have to go about stopping them from being quite so good. They have two very evenly matched sides. Let's talk about it. So we're going to kick things off. We're going to talk about Germany, and we're going to go over to whoscored.com, and we're going to take a look at the heat maps for their games against France and Portugal, mainly. The game against Hungary was a little bit all over the place. Germany completely dominated the game. Hungary scored 2 great goals, but yeah, Germany should have really been winning that game, sort of like 5-0, but it didn't really work out like that. Whereas the games against Portugal and France are much better examples of how, if England play the way England have been playing, they will get hurt quite a lot. Okay, so what you're looking at here is the heat map for France versus Germany. It was one of the first games of the tournament, you might recall. I'll say, well, the first game for both of these sides of the tournament, and France come in as this hotly tipped side to win the tournament, right? I have them as that as well. And Germany come in as sort of underdogs, it feels like, for the first time in a long time. There's obviously this experience with Germany. They've been there before. They know what's what. And this is the heat map. You can see it. They have controlled the game completely against a French side that a lot of people, again, are tipping for absolute greatness. The likes of Kante and Pogba and Mbappe and Benzema and Varane and all these players that, on paper, like, people would put above all these German players. But the way in which Germany are able to hold the ball and keep the ball and stop teams playing the way that they want to play is been so pivotal to their successes. And the irony of this is, of course, they lost this game. They shouldn't have lost it. Watch it back. They should not have lost the game. France were very fortunate. They score. The only goal they get is a Hummel's own goal. At worst, this should have been a 0-0 for Germany. They didn't penetrate the French defense enough. They didn't go for goals enough. They were in too much control, and that was something that I think they noticed quite a lot and then rectify. Just very quickly, if you bring up the French heat map, look how, if this was England, you'd go, why are they not getting into the penalty area? There is almost like a German blockade. You cannot get through the way they set up. That 3 at the back system they've got, with Kroos and Gundogan sitting just in front, with Goossens on the left and Kimmich on the right. Without the ball, it's incredibly difficult to break down. They're pressing from the front, and France couldn't get a grip of the game at all. It just was not happening. And you think about what they've done here to France, it's almost like a face. These are the 2 eyes, and they've got a shocked mouth. Like, how are they? Why are we not having more of the ball against Germany? So again, dominating against Portugal. Things didn't change too much in terms of the heat map. Like, they were a little bit more exciting going forward. They were able to get into the penalty area a little bit more. They spent more time in the penalty area. But again, what they did really cleverly was they tried to draw Portugal out a little bit more. They said to Portugal, well, if you want to come and get the ball, you come and get the ball. And there were times when Portugal tried to do that and didn't do it very effectively. And with having a 4 at the back defense, you either have to be really defensive and really cautious, and that's what France had to do. France had to sit, as we saw, had to sit very deep and basically back themselves as defenders to be disciplined enough to not get drawn out of position, especially by these overlapping fullbacks that we'll talk about in a minute. Kimmich and Goossens are playing like prime Jordi Alba and Dani Alves for Barcelona. That's the closest I can think of to teams that Germany are playing like right now. But again, there is this immense idea of control for Germany. Again, they're forcing Portugal to play a game they do not want to play. Portugal want to be on the ball. They want to be pushing forward. The advantage for England is that England don't have a style of play, really. England don't really have they have this idea of control right now, and England are dominating games in a similar way to Germany. It's quite funny. They're actually quite well matched. The difference is, for me, that Germany have done it against Portugal and then against France. And while they haven't won both of those games, they've shown a style of play that they all understand, and that for England could be a big problem. Right, let's move over to another screen here. And again, we'll start with the France game as I sort of delve into a white background with me wearing a white t-shirt. Mistakes have been made. But what I want you to focus on chiefly is the positions of number 6 here and number 20 here, right? This is Kimmich and Goossens. They are pushed up as high as you can be pushed up, really, as fullbacks, as high as you can be pushed up without being ahead of your forward line. They do it against France there, and against Portugal, it was even more pronounced, right? They got 4 goals in the game. I suspect that was part of it. Forced a couple of own goals. Goossens gets himself a goal in the game as well, I believe it was. I had one ruled out as well. Anyway, it's basically they have a lot of the ball. They're very much involved, and they are pivotal to how Germany control things. And what's amazing is, to me, this thing, like against Portugal here, they are playing a full 90 minutes. This is so like in shape and in sync. Having those 3 there, having those 2 there. Portugal at the example, that's quite rare. Like if you use France as the example as well, whether it be France or Portugal, there's a bit of a like all these 5 players are sort of all doing similar things. You could say Germany are doing the same thing, but defensively there is like this quite well set. You could argue to say that Gundogan got a little bit further ahead later in the game against France, but still it's quite surprising to see it so disciplined, and the ability for them to keep the ball and control the ball is where England are going to find their biggest difficulties. So while it's not a case that Kimmich and Goossens are causing teams endless problems with their actual play, right, with what they're actually doing with the ball, don't get me wrong, they've got a couple of assists, they've got a goal between them as well. They're definitely having an impact in the game, more so than England's fullbacks are, which I think is probably fair to say. It's what they're offering Germany, that natural width. And not just natural width, actually, it allows the central players to think, we don't have to be in those wide positions because they're already occupied by players that have been instructed to play in those areas. And Joachim Löw has got Germany playing in such a way that if you press them, there is an option every single time. And again, I hark it back to Barcelona did it with the back 4. That's what made Barcelona so impressive. And Busquets was sort of the anchor for everything. And Germany don't have an anchor. Toni Kroos sort of plays like that because of his fantastic playmaking abilities. The crucial thing for England then, with the way that Germany play and with the way that Germany are able to create chances for themselves, and when they're not doing that well enough, it's when they're not getting into the spaces that cause the back 2 problems. And that's something they're not doing necessarily enough for me. Again, they're trying to stretch teams. They basically got Portugal and just pulled them apart and said, try and stop us from doing this then. And Portugal couldn't. They played a back 4, and Germany had an overload every single time. They had that 3 up front that were creating a lot of problems. As soon as another midfielder pushes into that, by the way, Portugal didn't know what to do with themselves, and they've still got this width. And this whole time, by the way, you've got to remember this, that the whole time they've got 3 defenders just sitting there, not involved at all in the play, just sitting there. They're an option if the ball comes back, and then a big switch can be played to the other side and things like this. Because of the way that they're positioned, there's always going to be these spaces. And as Portugal side, they just turned them. They just turned Portugal over and over again. So you had these creative players thinking, I'm running back a little bit. Ronaldo completely isolated. And this was a game where Portugal scored a couple of goals. So still within that, Germany are fallible. The way in which they were able to break the lines and counter-attacking for Portugal was really important, like finding those spaces when Germany have this immense amount of control, when both fullbacks are pushed on, when an extra midfielder has committed, and having these 3v3 scenarios where you're turning Toni Kroos all of a sudden and he's running back to his own goal. That's where England have to find some joy in this game. Otherwise, they're not going to win. It's really that simple. Now, man for man, player for player, I don't think there is a huge gulf in quality between the 2. I think if you had to edge it to one side, you'd actually probably give it to Germany, like just about. There are some players in that side that I think England would really enjoy having. I think in terms of someone like Harry Kane, they don't have a Harry Kane, admittedly out of form for England right now. I think they'd love a player like him. I think at the back, the defences, I think you'd maybe edge it towards England. I think goalkeeper, Pickford or Neuer. I'll let you decide that one. In the fullback areas, again, Kimmich is absolutely fantastic, one of the best fullbacks in the world. But I think collectively, Goossens is showing how good of a defender he is and how good of a player he is actually in this tournament. So maybe you give him a little bit more credit. And in midfield, I think it's relatively even. I don't think it's as wide a gap. I think Toni Kroos is probably the standout of all the midfielders. If you took the England and Germany teams and lined them up, you'd probably say Kroos was at the top of the list. And then there's sort of a mix of quite a few others, right? So let's talk about the team. You're here to see my England team, but I wanted to talk about how and why you select the team that I'm selecting, which causes Gareth Southgate a lot of problems and a lot of headaches. And I don't know what he'll do. I really, and this is what makes sort of international football quite interesting when you've got a squad as this big with this much depth. I don't know what he'll do, but let's go through it then. Kicking off with goalkeeper, I think it's his time. Aaron Ramsden, no, I'm joking. Jordan Pickford, of course, remains in goal so far. Has been one of England's best performers, which is quite easy when they don't attack. But yeah, we'll talk about England's way of approaching this game in a moment. So Pickford in goal, and this is where there has to be a big change for me. And this is where Gareth Southgate needs to be. Gareth Southgate is a very pragmatic manager. He has to showcase this now in this game against Germany. Otherwise, there is no point in being this pragmatic manager, Gareth. Because if you play a 4 at the back against Germany, I'm going to say it now, if England start with a 4, they will lose. They will lose heavily. They are not good enough as a back 4, in my opinion. They're good. They've not conceded a goal. Like, you talk about control, England have been very difficult to break down. They've not played a team with the quality of Germany, with the forward players of Germany yet, and I believe they will become unstuck. But if, this is a big if Gareth decides to play the 5 at the back, let's go through it then. Luke Shaw, Harry Maguire, John Stones, this is where it gets tricky, Kyle Walker and Kieran Trippier. At that point, you probably give yourself the best chance. Now, there are arguments for Reece James and bringing Kyle Walker in as the centre-back when you could play Tyrone Mings on the left-hand side and maybe play Maguire centrally. They're all options. I think Maguire and Stones are better on the ball. I think Kyle Walker is better on the ball. I've seen him do it all season for Manchester City. He's more than happy to sit on the right side of a defensive back line and carry the ball forward into midfield. And those defenders doing that are absolutely crucial, right? And having Maguire step out of defence occasionally, have John Stones step out of defence occasionally, break the first attacking line, work towards those 2 central midfielders, and then work around them, turning Tony Kroos, turning Gundogan. That has to happen. These England defenders have to be confident enough to do it. We saw Harry Maguire do it recently against the Czech Republic. We have to see those England defenders be brave enough on the ball to make those strides forward, right? With the fullbacks, you bring Trippier back into the right-hand side. You bring Shaw onto the left-hand side. I think it's important to keep the natural width. So I'd have Shaw at left-back over Trippier and instead of having like Reece James at right-back, which is a bit unlucky for Reece James. I think he was a victim of playing in England's most sort of disappointing game, really. It's about control, and it's going to be a battle of control. You need to be able to keep the ball when you've got it, and so far that's something England have done very well. I've shown you post match the pass percentage completion rates of England, right? I've shown you they're all in the 90s. So are Germany's. Germany's are the same. Germany's ability to keep the ball is devastating for England if we can't get near them, and that's my big fear. There are going to be like 10-15 minute periods in this game where Tony Kroos is looking like the best midfielder to have ever lived. That's my prediction for the game. It's going to be whether England can find a way to just stop him at some stage. And I've got a plan for Tony Kroos, and we'll come to that in just a moment. So, that's the back 5. Trippier one side, Luke Shaw the other side. I think they offer you good control. I think Trippier's ability on the ball is really impressive. And I also think his ability going forward, whipping crosses in towards Kane and making movements to disrupt what's happening with Goossens and to control Goossens at the same time. I think that's going to be absolutely crucial. And similarly, we're giving Luke Shaw the job of stopping Kimmich, which is... I think Luke Shaw's a good defender, and I think he's had a good season. I think Kimmich is probably better than Luke Shaw, so I'm concerned about that side, but I still think it's good enough, and I think what it offers England offensively is still very important, so we'll go with that. In midfield, this is a big call. This is a huge call because you have to make a decision now, and I'm going to pick a midfield 2 that I don't really like as a midfield 2 against most teams. Against this German side, this to me makes the most sense. I'm picking Declan Rice and I'm picking Jordan Henderson. And I think Calvin Phillips is right to be annoyed at me because the energy he brings, the ability to disrupt he brings, the ability to run beyond that he brings is all really important. But I think in this game against Germany, and I keep mentioning the word control, England have to find a way to stay level-headed at all times, to play short, simple passes, to keep the ball, to frustrate Germany in moments. And I think the leadership that Jordan Henderson brings is going to be more important in a game like this, with his experience at the highest level of football. This man has won Champions Leagues, which I'm obviously very happy about. And you have to allow him to play his Jordan Henderson is quite an expansive footballer. He has the ability to play balls forward, but when required, he is more than happy to be the third man running at any point, right? To be the head of a triangle, to be the base of a triangle, where England have to keep the ball. So having him in there alongside Declan Rice, who is defensively a little bit more switched on than our other midfielders and our other options, and I think it's had a pretty decent tournament, really. And again, I talk about the way Germany keep the ball. Declan Rice this tournament so far done a pretty good job of that as well. I think he probably deserves it. He's also got height on Calvin Phillips, and I don't think it's crucial. Germany aren't massive. Like the German teams in the past have been quite big, and this side are relatively big too. Set pieces could be huge in this game. I think having two slightly taller midfielders in Jordan Henderson and in Declan Rice is probably to the advantage of England, both offensively and probably more importantly defensively. So that's another reason I think having them both in there is quite crucial. So far, we've got the 5 set. We've got the 2 sat just in front as sort of protectors, and right now we are copying the German system. And in the forward 3 areas, this is where I'm definitely going to split opinions, because I'm picking a trio that I think haven't played as a trio yet, because we've always seen England play a 4-2-3-1, and there's been 4 up front. The interesting part around this is that I think this gets the best out of Harry Kane, curiously, because you're asking Kane to do a little bit more, you're giving him a little bit more space, and you're asking him to basically be the kingpin at the top, right? He's going to control everything that goes around him, players buzzing around him. I mentioned Tony Kroos, and I said I have a plan for Tony Kroos, and that plan is Mason Mount. Now, I think, despite the fact Mount has been training individually, right, fitness-wise, if he's not had coronavirus, he's probably still pretty fit. He's probably still pretty sharp. So allow Mason Mount to sit on Tony Kroos and disrupt that man as much as possible. And then when we break away, forget Kroos, make Kroos chase you, right? And move into spaces where Kroos does not want you to go, cause the defense problems, press when you need to press. If England can step up enough and do a bit more of a team press, then fantastic. That's going to be really interesting to see. But I'd select Mason Mount ahead of maybe Grealish and ahead of Foden, because while I think both of those players work hard, and we've seen that Grealish can run very fast, there's a stat that came out that he's very quick, I think Mount's engine is more important, and I think it's slightly smarter than it necessarily is for Grealish and Foden in terms of like the defensive responsibility. So I'd put Mount in there. I also think set pieces and things like that, Mount's very capable, so having another player in there that can do that, although with Trippier maybe that's less important, I still think having options in those sort of roles is important. So I'd go with Mason Mount. This is where I'm definitely going to split opinion, because I think Sancho's not had enough game time. I don't think Rashford looks 100% fit. I don't think the game is right for Phil Foden from the start, at least. I definitely see a situation where Foden comes in late in the game and starts to control it. And if England were slightly better as an overall, I think you could probably risk starting Phil Foden, maybe instead of Mount. But again, I think you have to restrict what happens centrally. Raheem Sterling gets back in for me. And because I've watched the way in which Germany have been cut open at times, and people have caused them problems, and it's speed. And Rashford offers it, but doesn't, to me, have as good a connection with Harry Kane, whereas Sterling and Kane's connection seems pretty good to me. Like, it was really good in qualifying. Again, go back and watch Harry Kane's goals, see how many times Raheem Sterling was involved. If they can link up, it doesn't have to happen loads. And we talked about the Son Harry Kane situation at Tottenham, and that it doesn't really exist with England. The one time we've seen it happen occasionally, and again, he's got a couple of goals as well, Sterling, is when he's making those movements into the space that Harry Kane leaves. And I think Sterling then has to be your man. We need a big performance from him. If he doesn't play well, it could cost England the tournament. Like, I don't want to put it all on Sterling, but he's that crucial to how this team are going to play that he has to be a big part of it, basically. And this is like his big moment. This will be the moment people remember. There's lots of questions over him. Is he going to step up and be the guy? Or ultimately, is this just not necessarily his tournament, despite scoring 2 goals? Yeah, England have had a weird group stage. And then Kane up front. And again, I think you have to involve him as much as possible. And I think in terms of holding the ball up and bringing others into play, I think he's done that pretty well. He won't be required to drop as deep with this system. If you're playing 5 at the back, if you're playing those 2 central players that are going to be quite safe with it, sure, if you want to control the play for a little bit, you want to keep possession, Harry Kane should be dropping deep. He's very good with the ball at his feet. He's very good at passing the ball short or passing it long and making teams turn. And I think this is so important, right? I think being on the front foot against Germany for extended period of times is going to be really difficult. I think England's ability to quickly turn a team, to send Luke Shaw forward, to send Trippier forward, to have Henderson or Rice, probably going to be Henderson in this situation, racing forward. That's where there'd be an argument for Phillips, by the way. I totally understand that. He's the fitter player. Again, I think there are qualities that Henderson brings, though, that Phillips doesn't bring. And then have Mount and Sterling and Kane be that attacking force. And if it's not working, well, guess what? You've got 5 substitutions, you've got Sancho, you've got Grealish, you've got Foden. If creativity is the problem and you're still in the game by 60, or you're 1-0 down after 60 minutes, then yes, at that point, take those gambles. If you think that you're having enough of the play and you're in enough control to bring those players on, let's see it. But I wouldn't take if I'm Southgate, as much as I want to see England be excellent, I wouldn't take the gamble that early. I'd wait, I'd be patient, and then I'd bring on those creative players. So what do you think? That's the team I'd select. Do we have a chance? Yeah, I think if we're going to win, it'll be a 1-0. It'll be a 2-1. It'll be a very, very close game. It might go to extra time. It might go to penalties. Either way, I'm really excited for it. I think the tactical battle between Lowe and Southgate here is going to be huge. I think I will know based upon the lineups I see at kickoff, or an hour before the game starts, whether I think England will do it or not. You'll know my thoughts on that now. If you play a 4, I think England will lose. If they play a 5, I think you give yourselves a real chance. And if Harry Kane turns up, which he hasn't so far, statistically, Kane will score this game. Like that's what his record suggests. So, come on, England. Maybe we're overrating them. Whoever wins this game should be in the final. Like, and no disrespect to the other teams, in terms of quality, they should be in the final. So England have got a real chance here, and hopefully the pressure of that doesn't overwhelm them. If you enjoyed the analysis, if you enjoyed the chat, get in the comment section, leave your thoughts. Feel free to ask questions if anything I've said doesn't make sense to you, and I will try and get back to them. Let's talk about the football. Hopefully you enjoy these videos. If you do, make sure you subscribe. There's going to be plenty more over the rest of the tournament, and that's going to bring us to the end. With love, with care, from DoctorBenjy. Until next time, I'll see you again very, very soon. Goodbye. Lovely. Hope you win, because this will be awkward.